Hello and thanks for watching. So I just watched a movie called V for Vendetta. Um, Incredible movie, highly recommend it. Um, but this video is I just wanted to do an informal review, I guess, of a particular aspect of this video or this movie, and that's the anonymity of the main character V. So the title V for Vendetta um, is a reference to the main character V, um, who in one of his opening soliloquy uses had to be close to 20 words beginning with the letter V in a rapid sequence to make a single sentence about his mission, essentially. So what V does throughout the movie is essentially take down this totalitarian government that has taken over Great Britain, the UK. Um, and he takes it down systematically over a year from November 5th to November 5th. And what's significant about that date is that's Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes is famous for attempting the gunpowder plot, um, which happened in the 1800s, um, and he attempted to blow up Parliament, the Parliament building, because there was strife um, between the people as to who should be running the government, and the government was taking advantage of that strife, and was really kind of pummeling around its own people. Um, so he makes it a point to systematically destroy um, this government, but he gets his motive from a personal issue he had. He was essentially an experiment when this totalitarian government came into power. He was taken, held captive, tortured, beaten, all sorts of things until there was an explosion in the lab, and he survived. He's completely covered in burns, and he keeps himself completely covered in the movie, which is another interesting element of his anonymity. Um, so, anyway, this character V, and why I think it's important that he maintains perfect anonymity through the entire movie, even after, spoiler alert, even after his death. Um, I believe the anonymity of the character V is exceptionally important because we can relate to someone who's partaking in actions that we might not necessarily condone. So V starts off by blowing up Old Bailey, which is the courthouse in London, um, incredibly famous, been around for hundreds upon hundreds of years. So he begins by blowing up Old Bailey, and the first explosion ironically goes off to blow up Lady Justice, who's a statue on top of Old Bailey. Um, and he completely blows this building to smithereens in the middle of the night, while blaring the 1812 overture, Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture over speakers. Um, so that's just a single example, um, on top of killing countless people, um, and again, spoiler alert, in the end of the movie, blowing up the Parliament building via a subway train loaded with explosives. Um, so those behaviors aren't socially acceptable. That's not something that um, we as human beings condone. That's not something that we are typically okay with. Uh, but we somehow begin to empathize with this man who has no facial expression, who can convey no emotion through his eyes, through his face, um, which you don't realize, but that is such a huge tool in the way we convey ourselves is our facial expressions, and um, especially through our eyes. You can see there's the old saying that the eyes are the window to the soul. Um, there are so many things that come from being able to see a human being's face, and due to his disfigurement or whatever the case may be, he is wearing the Guy Fawkes mask, which you may or may not know. It's the anonymous mask. The anonymous hacker group now uses that. Um, so he maintains this perfect anonymity, And I think that that was purposely done. Um, and I believe it is because um, it's actually illustrated extremely well in Evie, who is the female co-lead um, to V, the anonymous character. Um, and the end of the movie, after she has sent off the subway train carrying his body and all the explosives, she is on she's on the roof of V's house, looking out towards the Parliament building. Um, and you hear the overture in the background, and she's up there with the chief inspector, who is a detective essentially, the top detective in the government, and he has been hunting V the entire movie. Um, but he finally finds Evie after V is already dead, and she convinces him to allow her to send that train off at the stroke of midnight on November 5th. Um, so they're on top of this roof, and Evie is giving this little monologue about her experience, and she said, "People will remember um, this day is one of the greatest day in our government's history," um, and goes through this whole soliloquy about how he was all of us. Um, he asked who he was. The chief inspector asked who he was, and she said he was my father, my mother, my brother, um, my aunts, my uncles, my friends. He's you. Right to the chief inspector, he's everyone. Um, and I think that's the beauty of the anonymity of his character throughout the entire thing. Is because we truthfully get to kind of immerse ourselves in the experience and take on the personality role of V. Um, it's a character that is very complex and very enriched with a complete lack of um, concrete structure. He's this completely blacked out character, so to speak, and we still relate to him incredibly. And that even goes into um, his costuming is entirely black, um, with nothing open except for one scene in the movie when his hands are out and you can see that they're burned and disfigured. Um, his voice and his speech patterns are also incredibly interesting, and I think that's how we get our impressions of him. Typically, directors will use first impressions based on visuals um, to make the viewer feel a certain way about a character. But since the directors and producers of this movie did not have that, they had complete anonymity and no solid structures, no solid physical structures to play with. They did it um, through his voice and through his vocal patterns. So when he first comes in, he uses extremely extravagant um, vocabulary, out of this world kind of stuff, um, and it even blows Evie away, which you come to find out later because things like books and stuff like that are beginning to be banned, because this totalitarian government does not like that people are delving into things that they shouldn't be, that are a risk to their society that they've built. So he uses this extensive vocabulary, and um, every viewer is intimidated. It's not something that's an exception to a person. Everyone is intimidated by this vocabulary, and that's true in day to day life. If someone came at you and threw 20 words in your face and you had no idea what any of them meant, um, it would be difficult to comprehend, and you would feel attacked almost, because your brain is working 1,000 miles a minute to try to comprehend what this person you've never met before is saying to you. So that happens, and then gradually through the movie, his vocabulary stays distinct and well educated, but doesn't take on that extreme um, form that it has in the very beginning, which I think is interesting because it takes us through that curve of relation that we tend to have with an anti-hero main character. So we're intimidated by them, scared, we don't like them, we're curious about them, or we're not sure how to feel about them, and then we go through the curve of, okay, we're getting there, but we're still not sure, and then they probably do something that we very strongly question and we're not on board, and then we see the positives that they had seen all along. Foresight's 2020, um, or hindsight's 2020. But we see the benefits that they saw all along, and we're like, okay, you know, this guy is someone I can relate with, or this character is someone I can relate with, and it's this beautiful. It was just a beautiful representation, and the reason I did it in this format, just speaking to a camera, was because I didn't feel like a bunch of effects and things in the video would have helped understand this. I think the beauty of this wasn't in the concrete so much, like what he looked like. It was the fact that he didn't look like anything. It was the abstract meaning behind the character of V. Um, so to kind of wrap up, I guess, I think the anonymity of V is a way to open up a whole different dimension of viewing. We get to immerse ourselves in the main character. Um, we listen to content more than look at it. That was another interesting directing thing. He took away those visual first impressions. The director took away those visual first impressions and made us view that character and really go on that emotional roller coaster of development that V goes through. Um, and I think it was just a beautiful tool that the director used to kind of tear down the walls of typical movie viewing. And it may just seem like it was there as a consequence of the plot of the movie. And I'm not one to say what order that came in, but I would like to say that the plot is a consequence of the character. Um, Whatever the theme may have been, I think the anonymity of that central character was something that could have been an idea that sparked an entire movie. And I would love to see more movies like this in future, that the character is completely anonymous. I know there was a movie that came out within like the past 4 or 5 years that was really interesting called Hardcore Henry, I think is what it was, and that was a first person movie. You were the main character the whole time. Um, so things like this have been explored, but I think a completely anonymous character with no unmasking, even in death, um, gives the viewer a sense of one, anxiousness because there's no closure. Two, it allows us to be completely immersed. Three, it makes us pay attention to what the content of that character is rather than the visual first impressions. Um, and I think it makes for an all around deeper and more intense viewing experience. So I hope you all, if you have not seen this movie, I hope you watch it. It was on Netflix. If you have Netflix, if not, I'm sure you can find it and rent it at any of your local movie rental stores. Highly, highly recommend viewing this movie. Um, Thank you so much for watching. I hope you understand it, and I hope you think back on this video if you ever go to watch the movie and you can really see what I mean um, in the movie of V for Vendetta and how beautiful anonymity can be in a lead character.